I'd like to call this meeting to order, please. Would you all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, the first order is to approve tonight's agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the Board of Education, wait a minute, getting ahead of myself, the agenda for tonight?
So moved. Second.
Second, any discussion on the agenda? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. That passes.
I can't even read that. Can you read that?
I'm going to get it right here.
Oh,
The next motion is to approve the Board of Education meeting minutes for February 16th.
so moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on those minutes? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. That passes as well. Any patron cards? Great. Move on to the superintendent and board comments, and I will turn that over to our Dr. Knows.
All right, wonderful. Good evening.
Good evening. Try it again.
Good evening.
Good evening. There we go.
You're welcome.
I'm going to start off with a couple of announcements. We've made it our custom in the last few years that when the Board of Education hires administrators in closed session that we make that announcement in open session, and when possible we introduce those new administrators for the 17-18 school year in this case. I'm going to start with one of our new administrators that could not be here tonight, but our Bowles Elementary School.
She's here, right there.
Well, looky there. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought I understood you weren't going to be here, Aaron. Bowles Elementary School Administrative Intern Erin Koch. Ms. Koch has 8 years of experience as a classroom teacher at Westridge Elementary School in the Rockwood School District. She has served on Rockwood's math task force and is a lighthouse team leader at Westridge. She graduated from the University of Missouri-Columbia with a degree in elementary education. She earned a master's degree and her educational specialist in administration from Lindenwood University. She will replace Mr. David Bates, who left the district to pursue a different administrative position, or will leave at the end of this year. So we are extremely pleased to announce Erin Koch as the new Bowles Elementary School Administrative Intern. Stand up and wave. Thank you very much. Also, tonight we've approved our new CFO for the 17-18 school year and beyond, and that is Mr. Paul Northington. Mr. Northington has more than 20 years of experience in school finance, currently serves as the Director of Business and Finance with the Hancock Place School District in St. Louis. He's a certified administrator of school finance and operations as designated by the Association of School Business Officials. Prior to his service in public education, he was employed in the banking industry and has leadership experience as a vice president and internal auditor. He will replace our current CFO, Mr. Tim Rooney, who is retiring at the end of this school year. Paul is able to be with us tonight. All welcome and congratulations. We are very excited about our new administrators. A few other announcements. This week, the Rose Award Patrol made its way across the district, surprising our 15 Rose Award recipients in our schools. That means it was balloons and roses and cheers and high fives and some tears here and there of joy, as Andrew Shin, Curtis Brennicky, and company made their way into unsuspecting classrooms and offices throughout the district. The complete list of the 15 Rose Award winners can be found on our district website, Facebook page, or Twitter page. Congratulations to those honorees. Also, our Rockwood Teachers of the Year have been announced. And an important part of any student's education is a teacher who sets high expectations for learning. Each year, each school selects its own Teacher of the Year. You can check out the list of all the Rockwood Teachers of the Year by looking for that story on the district website or Facebook page or Twitter page. Congratulations to our outstanding educators. And a pretty cool story that very relevant to a lot of what we talk about with innovation, and people often ask, what does that mean? We keep trying to show examples of what that means. This story is doing very well on our district social media pages, and it's about Rockwood administrators and teachers who are, quote, amped up, unquote, over new math courses. We've talked about this before. Karen's brought this forth with Shelley in our curriculum department. Staff attended a professional learning conference on AMPed and geometry in construction last month. AMPed stands for Algebra 1 in Manufacturing Processes, Entrepreneurship, and Design. Geometry in construction is just what the title suggests. Both classes will be offered to Rockwood High School 9th and 10th graders next school year. The classes bring together a math teacher and a career and technical education teacher. Students will be taught to apply what they learn in algebra in a business setting, in this case, a t-shirt business. Secondary math facilitator Lisa Lingle says students will have to decide on cost, how to run the business component, and all things that would make the business profitable. And the whole idea of geometry and construction, these kids may end up building a house, correct? Could happen. They're going to build things and apply what I would have as a high school geometry student found much more pleasure in than the traditional teaching of geometry. That's all I have for tonight.
Any other board members have comments?
I just wanted to thank publicly Brittany. She's the coordinator of educational equity and diversity. They invited me to come speak to the Girls the Love Project. It's a program that selects certain girls and boys. They're separate. I just went to speak to the girls, and I was just, humbled to be able to be in that position, a position of leadership within Rockwood, and speak to them and share, various experiences, and hopefully give them, insight as far as, what to expect, like the real world, and, various things they could strive to become, because this project, I don't know if we speak about it at all or very much, but it is there to build these young girls up. Yep. And to help them deal with, social emotional issues, and help them deal with their difference, being a minority. And grateful that I was able to be in this position, and that they welcomed me, invited me, and thought that I would be a positive influence on their lives. So I want to thank Brittany publicly.
And thank you for doing that.
Yeah. You represent us well. Thank you. Any other board comments?
Tomorrow's spring break.
Tomorrow's spring break, yes. We know that. Moving on to the consent agenda items, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items as submitted?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. I don't think there are any, we usually pull out the gifts to the district, but I don't see any in there tonight, so. Any discussion on the consent agenda items? All right, the motion is to approve them. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. That passes. Thank you. The regular agenda items. The first one is the middle school program, and I think Lisa Counts and the committee members are going to join us. I need a motion to approve the recommendations and development of implementation teams and timeline as presented by the Middle School Program Design Committee.
So moved. Second.
A motion and a second. Welcome, Lisa.
This one work?
I have one too.
Oh,
You guys could duel over
this
this.
one work?
I can reverse you.
Okay. It's on. I just had trouble seeing it, sorry. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having us tonight. I first want to start, we have a great crowd here tonight. I'd love to say that they're here for me, but they're here to support this fantastic topic. So can I ask anyone who was on the middle school steering committee or working committee to please stand up, because there's a lot of you here. So please stand. Thank you very much. These dedicated folks who have been working on definitely. Thank you, guys. And I mean that. They have put in some time and effort and energy since, for about a year and a half now. So they have stuck with this effort, and we wouldn't be here to talk about some exciting improvements for middle school if it weren't for you all. So thank you guys for coming. I greatly appreciate every one of them. Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm going to give a quick overview, and then each of our subcommittee chairpersons will share with you an overview of the recommendations. So a little history and an update. You've probably heard this before, but just so we're all starting from the same context, we have been working on this program review since December of 2015. As we've said, we've had about 50 members on this committee, teachers, parents, students, a wide representative of district personnel and administrators from across the district. We've done a lot of research. We've read research on best practices. We've surveyed local community or local districts in Missouri. We've researched districts across the nation. We've looked at best practices, and then we've also pulled results from our community. And we've done several different formal and informal surveys to really inform the decisions and the next steps that we want to recommend for our program design. So that's kind of what brought us to this point. You might recognize this slide, and this is what we used to get us off the ground. What do we really want our middle school experience to be for our students, and what do we want all students to have access to? What do we really believe in that is best for our middle school students? So then our committee designed our middle school pillars, and those were the things that we felt had to be foundational in all of our work, that any decision that we made, any ideas that were brought forward needed to encompass these things. And those words were very simple, but yet really we felt like we're at the heart of anything we would decide, and those were explore, empower, engage, and belong. And by looking at those words, those philosophical ideas, we felt those were the things that are going to lead to student achievement, whether that's academic, whether that's social, emotional. Those 4 words we thought really were the heart of what middle school should be about, and our decisions then should be based on that foundation. So next, I'm going to turn it over in just a moment to each of our facilitators of these subcommittees, and tonight you're going to hear recommendations in the following areas: middle school start time, academic needs, social and emotional needs of students, and then the middle school schedule. When you read the recommendation for approval, you may have noticed that what we're asking for tonight will be an approval of a chance for us to move forward with the district implementation team. So we don't have an exact outline of what that looks like, but we're asking for your approval on these recommendations to really take it to that next step, to develop the details and the timeline of what this implementation would look like. So you'll hear a little bit about that. Each of our subcommittee facilitators will talk with you a little bit more about that. So as each of them come up, I will introduce them. And again, the middle school principals have been so instrumental in this work. They have each led a subcommittee. I want to also not forget, I'll start with him this time. Mike Anselmo has been, he led a subcommittee on extracurricular activities. And when we had the addition of after-school activity buses, or we'd love more, but we're very happy with the one we have at each school. That really shifted the focus of his work, because that was a huge goal of that subcommittee, is to look at how we can get more students involved. Well, obviously, it helped with that. So I don't want anyone to forget Mike, because he was our principal at Selvage Middle School. I don't want to forget his role in this, but you're going to hear from everybody else, so I don't want you to think that Mike didn't have a role in this committee, because he certainly did. He had a huge part, so I don't want to leave him out. We offered to let him present tonight, but he declined that offer. So, all right, so I'm going to turn it over at this time to Dr. Allison Klaus, principal at Wildwood Middle School.
Good evening. On behalf of all of our middle school principals, we are so honored to be here in front of you today, so just thank you for allowing us to be here with you. So I had the charge to work with our start time subcommittee, and about a year and a half ago we started with one poll question, and that question was related to your feelings about our start times at the middle level. And that's the only question that we asked, and overwhelmingly about 80% of our community said we're not satisfied with the start time, and so we knew we had some work to do at that point in time. And so we began by researching, and we did a great deal of research, probably for 2 to 3 of our sessions that we were together. We looked at the National Sleep Foundation, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, many different articles, and different information, and overwhelmingly, the research tells us that biologically, our middle school students should not be coming to school at 7:30 in the morning, that it should be somewhere after 8 o'clock and closer to 8:30 if possible. And so then we went back and looked at additional research. Could we find anything that interrupted that said that it should be something different than at 8 o'clock, 8:30 time? And we found it difficult to find that data and that information. So from there, we also recognized and realized that, so biologically, that's exactly where our students should be starting their days, around 8 o'clock, 8:15, 8:30. But what about that parent piece or that preferential piece? Because as families, we have schedules and we have little ones to get on and off school buses. And so we knew we needed to reach out to our community and to our teachers and to our parents and ask several questions to get some more information from them. And so we looked at those personal preferences versus those biological factors. And from our survey, 68% of our parents and our staff wanted to change that start time. But then we asked some further questions, and if we did change the start time, what would be the best start time for you? And the start time that was most preferred was that 8 o'clock start time, followed by 8:15, and the third best preference was that 8:30 start time. And so from that, we made our recommendation to develop our start time sometime between the 8 and 8:45 time, because we also recognize that we have other constituents that we need to consider. We have high schools and we have elementary schools, and their families also need to be considered in this decision, because while we recognize that our charge is to look solely at the middle level, we also know that may potentially have an impact on the elementary and the high school level. And so from that, we also recommended to have an implementation team to study the feasibility. And I will share with you that our Director of Transportation, Mr. Sloan, has been with us every step of the way, has gone to every meeting, has given us any piece of data that we've asked for, just to give us an idea of what we're looking at moving forward. And so our recommendation is to look at changing the start time sometime closer to the 8 o'clock start time, as well as that implementation team to study the feasibility, because we need to also consider the impact and also getting feedback from our elementary and our high schools as well.
Very good.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Sally. Are you okay if I keep moving and then we'll do questions at the end, or do you want to do questions at each juncture?
Well, why don't we go through it? I mean, I think there's obviously some comments I need to make
Right.
about that
Right.
piece, just to make sure.
So what do you want me to
Yeah,
keep
let's
going?
go, let's keep going
Okay.
and go
All
through
right.
it, and then we'll.
All right, very good. Okay,
Questions.
so next I'm going to ask Miss Debbie Brandt to come on up, principal at LaSalle Middle School, and she's going to talk with us about the work they did with middle school schedule.
Good evening. So we too have done a great deal of research in the past year and a half about schedules. We've looked at lots of different options. And what we have come away with is a support for this later start time as one of our number one options to look at. But we would also like to form a diverse committee to continue researching scheduling. The reason is because we have some things that we want to look at with social and emotional growth of our students, as well as the academic growth. We support a schedule that looks at all those things. And we have surveyed our parents, our staff, our students, and we believe that an intervention time is needed to be built in the school day as well. So we've looked at options that include block scheduling, which is what we're currently doing. We've looked at a hybrid model, which would be a straight 8-period day combined with a block. But we haven't come away with enough data yet to make a definite recommendation about what we think we should move forward with. So that's why we're asking to form a more diverse committee. We want to continue looking at math every day, because that has been one of the strong tenets that has come out of our research and the surveys. We also believe we need to continue with language arts every day. Again, that intervention period of time is needed to be built into the schedule. So some of the questions that we anticipate or that we've already been asked are, what is an intervention time? So the intervention time could be various things. It can be reteaching, retesting of students. It can be a time for more experiential learning for students. It can be a time where they are exploring service learning and community service options, and more innovative teaching or accelerated teaching for our students. So we have a need for all of those things. Another question is, how will the schedule impact other classes such as science, social studies, Encore? And we want to make sure that the instruction time for all of those subjects are equitable across the board. The other question that is coming up is the topic of physical education every day. And while we have research available that we've been looking at, we need to further explore logistics about doing that, the feasibility of having physical education every day. We want our PE teachers to be more involved in that discussion, and we feel like we need to look at some neighboring districts and some more data about physical education. And lastly, the question that comes up is, will the staffing be impacted, and will our class sizes increase? And the committee will carefully review all the planning as we go along to make sure that class sizes are not increased and that our staffing doesn't change.
Very good. Thanks, Debbie. All right, next we'll ask Dr. Gary Jansen to come forward. He's going to discuss student academic needs. Dr. Lori Birkenmeyer also co-facilitated this committee, but she's ill this evening and couldn't join us. So Gary's going to carry the torch.
So our committee started out by looking at a lot of performance data, focusing in the areas of language arts and math. And what we found was there were gaps in some of our students' math understanding, and that we had several students, well, many students that are not reading on grade level. We used that information along with some recommendations from a comprehensive math program review that was recently conducted, and our survey results to make these two recommendations that you can see. So our plan is to have a team consisting of curricular experts, teachers, and administrators to develop a math sequence that will allow students to continue to accelerate through math curriculum when they are ready, but in a way that does not have them skipping standards. So what we see is a plan that would compact standards from more than one grade level into one. Part of that work also recognized the need for more frequent math instruction, and that would kind of led to what Debbie discussed about having math every day. So we've kind of punted that consideration towards the scheduling committee to infuse in with their plan. The second recommendation is to support our students in the area of reading. We've started some work actually in this area. We have some of our schools that are field testing Read 180 with the plan to roll that out to all of our schools so that we can continue to support all of our struggling readers in all of our schools. So we see that reading intervention would be conducted in the language arts block, and it would be a replacement course for that. And this program will help our students improve their reading skills while also being instructed on their grade level standards. Our committee recognizes the focus seems to be directly here on mathematics and language arts, and we believe those are the foundational skills, and if we have the improvements in those areas, they're going to have a positive impact on the other curricular areas as well.
Thank you. All right, thanks, Gary. Okay, the last subcommittee we're going to present to you tonight is Student Needs, Social and Emotional Focus, and Dr. Karen Hedrick, Principal of Rockwood Valley.
Thank you. Similar to Dr. Jansen's research in terms of how those academic skill gaps impact our students, we also see that there are skill gaps for our students in the area of social and emotional skills. Social emotional skills, specifically their ability to apply knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage their emotions. So oftentimes that skill gap also impacts their learning and achievement. So the guiding principle of our team was to look at how we create a comprehensive approach to meeting that skill gap at three levels. At our most intense level of need within our school district and across our region and throughout our nation, we see an ongoing increase in the number of students in the middle school age diagnosed with mental health issues. We see a marked increase in anxiety within our schools, and we continue to see within the Rockwood School District an increase in the number of students who are assessed annually for at-risk ideation of self-harm or escape desires and so forth. So those numbers continue to increase. So in order to try to address that most significant level of skill gap and impact of social and emotional needs, we are recommending that the district add staffing for social and emotional behavioral specialists at the middle school level, shared between buildings. Last year, we had a partnership through Lutheran Family and Children's Services that was providing those services, but then due to a decrease in the funding from the St. Louis Children's Fund, we lost access to those specialists who were supporting us. We found impact, and we recommend that if we add that within our own house under the roof of Rockwood, that we can give that direct service and support for our most at-risk students. To meet that mid-level of student needs, so those students who are somewhere sliding between being okay and on par at grade level in terms of being able to manage their emotions, and those who may be straying in a need for additional support, we're recommending that we also modify our staffing model for guidance counselors at the middle school level. So we spent time looking at really what have MSIP standards said, as well as other research in the area of what's best practice within this age range. And while ideal is lovely, ideal is a 1 to 250 ratio, we also know that that's not really necessarily what we are seeing a need for. But the minimum recommendation is 1 to 500, and that is far beyond what the needs of our students truly are showing to be. So we are asking to adopt kind of that mid-range, which would put us at about a 1 to 350 ratio. So we are looking at a slight increase in staffing, specifically at Crestview Middle School, LaSalle Springs Middle School, and Rockwood South Middle School, in order to bring them kind of in that mid-range of support for what is recommended for students at this level. And then finally, we are recommending a team be created, an advisory committee, to look at what is best practice for all students, so that we are providing between our guidance program and our classroom instruction direct support to students and direct learning around those social and emotional skills to hopefully then offset or prevent the need for those second level and most certainly those third level of supports.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so just some closing thoughts here, and then we will be happy to answer lots of questions, I'm sure. So next steps, obviously tonight we're looking forward to board approval to send us on our way for additional work. And then this spring, you've heard this a lot throughout our presentation, the development and work of the implementation team. And that really is the scope beyond what the middle school working committee could do. And that's where we need our district experts in finance, human resources, transportation. We need some content specialists, as Debbie was mentioning, as it impacts our daily schedule. We need some of those content specialists, whether that's math or PE. We need some in-depth work with our curriculum teams. So we're asking for board approval to start these implementation teams, to engage those district experts to help us develop what that timeline would look like. Because while there's not a specific ask here per se, Karen mentioned a few things that we see an immediate need maybe. Some of these are a little bit bigger than just impacting middle school, and so we're asking for the approval to move forward with these implementation teams to really engage a planning of a timeline to roll out these recommended needs and wants for the middle school. Best practices, we think, for the middle school. So with that, I will open it up for questions.
Say something? Yeah.
Well, I thought I would let the questions get to where I needed to speak before
All right.
so I don't dominate the conversation.
When we looked at this a while back and we talked about changing the middle school, and this comes up from time to time, the start time, and I think we understood that it would be better to have a later start time, and it sounds like you found good data to support that, so I commend you on the research. I guess that's still, the devil's in the details. If you're going to move that one later, and if the answer is you're going to move somebody else earlier, then I don't know that you really gained a lot. So if you're going to run consecutive buses, so you have to have more drivers working a shorter day, there's an impact to that.
Right.
If you're going to add more buses, there's a cost impact, which I think once before we looked at was pretty big. We'd be very interested in what, and everything's a trade-off, not that it's not a good thing to do, but if the transportation increase in cost means we can't spend money on something else that's equally as important, those are the kind of trade-offs we're going to have to look at. So I guess by approving this tonight, we're not saying go forth and do it. We're saying find a plan, find a way to make that integrate, so.
And that's exactly what we're asking for, is give us the permission to evaluate all those things. And I think Dr. Knost is chomping at the bit to give us more.
It's just unfortunate that we have limited resources, like every school district. So
that crazy
we do
how
have to
that
pick and choose between what's the best application.
Absolutely.
Do you know of any other districts that have how they're answering that question, that one of them starts that early? Do any of our neighbors do that?
Go ahead, Dan.
Actually, our middle school principals are trying to tell us, I don't know of other middle schools that start as early as
I didn't
ours.
bring that data with us, but we do have the start times in the middle schools within this area.
Right.
But I don't know that anyone has made a change from a 7:30 start time to an 8:15,
Okay.
8:30 start time in the recent years.
Yeah, I didn't Parkway a few years ago. They had it, then they switched it.
They've already made the.
So now the high school students are starting that early instead of the middle school students.
Which is what's typical.
Right, which,
Right.
okay. And a former board member, Janet Strati, threatened me that since her son was in high school, that if we changed it this year, she would do something bad, so.
Sorry.
Anyway, we won't not do that because of that.
Well, it's such an important topic, and Matt, I really appreciate your comments, because I think that we need help with communication on this, because when people hear that we're discussing this, and followed by the fact that, we're very transparent. So when we do surveys, we talk about those surveys and this 80% approval. So I get a lot of phone calls that say, okay, so now we see it's going to happen. And in fact, recently one phone call said that we gave the impression that we would immediately make that change. So there's some people that obviously in that 80% or whatever the average is that really want to change. So it's complex, hence the implementation team looking at how this works. But just to touch on some of Matt's points, our transportation system, as in all large transportation systems, cannot survive if it's anything less than a 3-tier. And not to get into all the weeds with that, but anything less than a 3-tier transportation system would consist of all part-time bus drivers. There's a bus driver shortage in our country, not specific to Rockwood and not specific. We do very well, and we've attracted drivers, but we would lose the vast majority of our drivers looking for full-time work if we were a part-time transportation system. So, and the reality of it too is it's much safer as far as, we put a lot of people on the road when we are in school and in session. I mean, not only our own bus transportation, but parents and students. So 3 tiers makes sense, and it's something we have to have. We have been working alongside, together with Lisa, and Terry's been involved, and Tim's been involved, and Bill Sloan's been involved, Mike Heyman has been involved, where we've tried to, stay alongside this discussion, seeing that we know it was coming, and say, are there models where that works? And we do have a model. There are more costs. We think they're feasible. We think there are things that we could do to make it work. The idea is quite simple. To make something happen where we can manipulate times without just flip-flopping middle school and high school. Cannot tell you, similar to Janet's comment, I cannot tell you how many parents have called me and said, my child has endured this middle school start time for 3 years, and now I hear next year you're going to switch it to the high school, for the next 4 years. No, we're not. That's not a real sound way to do things, to just flip-flop. So the idea really has to do with the fact that we need, between those tiers, the way we're currently structured, about a 45-minute time frame for those buses to do those routes and get staged for the next tier. The only way we can impact that is to decrease the need of time, and we focused on getting that down to about 20 minutes. How do you do that? You do that by finding any route that is more than 20 minutes long and cutting it in half. Hence, another bus, hence another bus driver. We think it's somewhat manageable. We think we could do that, and we've compacted the model of what that would look like at those start times. Instead of where we're currently at 7:30, 8:16, and 9 o'clock, we could potentially compact those start times, not saying which is which, but to more like a 7:55, which is really close to that 8 o'clock, 8:30, and 9:05. And so it's feasible. and it's feasible that we could potentially work that out in the budget. There's a lot of questions that have to be answered. And this is where it gets tricky, and I want everybody to listen really closely, because this is not officially connected to our bond issue. But if we're talking about cutting routes in half, we have to first wait and see what our bond issue does, because we know that if in the future we're looking at a district-wide redistricting effort where we're maybe putting kids on buses and pushing them farther out in the district, then our chances of having those smaller 20-minute routes plus staging are going to decrease enormously. So step one, we have to see what happens April 4 to see how feasible this plan is. The next thing also is we have to decide those very things that Allie was talking about and Elisa's mentioned. If we're going with a 7:55, an 8:30, and a 9:05, which is which? You know, do we push the middle school all the way a complete hour from 7:30 to 8:30, and then do we back high school up from 8:16 to 7:55, or do we push middle school from 7:30 to 7:55 and push high school from 8:16 to 8:30? Those are things we have to determine. Implementation team can do that. It's also coinciding with your high school review, who's talking about many of the same things, structure of the day, so more surveying. So it doesn't make sense, nor did we ever suggest that it was as simple as a survey, whatever it says we're doing next year. You want to implement it and do it right. So I'm sorry for that, that much depth, but I think it's really, really important for our parents and our community to understand that there are many, many facets to this decision. We're doing it right. Really applaud this middle school review team. I applaud their idea of the philosophical piece, now going to implementation pieces to see what we can move forward with. It's the right way to do it. It's dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and I think we can get something done. We just have to make sure that we continue looking at all those things that are impacted, and we'll see how it goes.
I appreciate you sharing all of that. This is something you guys have done just a fabulous job. I was able to come out several times and sort of peek in and observe, and just really appreciate the process and the work. And I have 2 middle schoolers, so I hear a lot. I have a lot of peers that come to me and say, "What's going on? What do you know about this? What do you know about that?" And so I really appreciated seeing this process and being able to share with people that, both sides of what you just said on this particular issue. One is people saying, but if we know what's best for kids, why aren't we just doing that? And then the other side, which could say, like Matt said,
It's not free.
right, it's not free. You can't, nobody's just checking it off on either side, which is, I really appreciate that. And not just your committee, but also like Bill and everybody who you've worked with and just mentioned, and all the work going into it from that perspective. I mean, it's smart, it's a big decision, and there needs to be a lot of thought given to it. And I also hope that along those same lines, and I know you all have this in mind, whether it's start time or the math cycle and how kids are pushed through, that some of those things possibly could be looked at quicker than others to a certain degree, just so that if there's a big impact on a lot of children, and I know everything we talked about tonight does that, but let's grab that and meet the needs of those kids as quickly as possible. Because, you just hate to see some of these things keep going when you can grab those kids now. So that's just my feedback.
So I have a couple questions. So why physical education every day? I'm a proponent of it, but what's the deal with that?
Debbie, you want to
think
talk to
Gary
that? Would you like
emphasized
me to
that,
answer?
or whoever emphasized that.
It's definitely something that the research has shown us that is beneficial to students and even in their daily learning. So I'll let Debbie expand on that a little bit.
Right. And I don't have the research with me tonight, but I could get that for you. And that's exactly right, what Lisa said. Studies that we looked at say that kids should be physically, physically active every day. And that helps their brains, it helps them academically when they do that. The surveys were kind of back and forth. One of the staff surveys showed us that about 55% of the staff felt like we should have PE every day. The parents were about 47%, I believe. And I'd have to pull out, the rest of it to look at that. But we met also with our coordinator for physical education in the district, and have had lots of discussions about the fact that we feel like it's a health concern and that we really want to look at ways that we are looking at the whole child. So that's where the recommendation came from, to look at it, not recommending that that has to happen. As I mentioned, we need to look at the feasibility and the real logistics of doing that.
Was it specific to PE or just physical activity in general? Like, have you considered, I don't want to call it recess, but something similar to that? I know that came up, at some point when I was there, but.
We did hear about recess.
Right.
Namely from the children.
Right.
Quite a bit.
The teachers?
And the teachers,
Yeah.
I believe it just addressed physical activity.
Yeah.
As a whole.
Yeah.
And since we don't have recess.
Right.
At the middle level, that's why we looked at PE.
Yeah.
But I
more in
think
depth.
and I think that's one of the beauties of the implementation team of, because we certainly don't want to have the perception that we spent a year and the scheduling committee or any committee just kind of talked about some stuff and researched some stuff and said, oh, let's go have another team research some stuff. I think where we're at now is we really want to dig into what specific possibilities there could be. And so I think those are all things that are potentially on the table
Right.
of if we know that physical activity is something that we want our children to have more of. Does it have to be PE? Does it look different at different grade levels? Does it look different for different students? And that could even apply on the academic and the social emotional side too, that do we have a way to make our schedule more fluid, more flexible, meeting the needs of individual students more than just shooting for the middle? Not that we do that. We do a lot of great things for a lot of kids, but is there a way to even open that up broader? And so I think that's what the implementation team focused on scheduling really wants to work off of some of these specifics that we got out of that survey from our staff and parents and students. And students had great responses to the survey too, so.
Well, the main reason why I ask is I feel sometimes kids get to middle school and then we stop the things that they did in elementary school because why? Now they're in 6th grade. What's wrong with them having recess in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade? If they're out with their friends, they're running around, they're being active.
Just call it something else. Don't call it recess.
Hey,
Debbie,
take a recess.
did I hear you say that your consideration would be an 8-period day, 7-period day? What?
We looked at
What is that?
at hybrid schedules that would offer all the subjects potentially every day, and then couple that with a block schedule too.
Okay.
So we really, our whole idea with the scheduling committee was to try to provide as many opportunities for kids as we could. So we've looked at lots of different options. Even multi-age grouping, that was one of the questions, asking if parents would be open to the idea of having their 6th graders with 8th graders maybe in some encore classes to try to open up the schedule.
And what was the response to that?
Favorable.
Favorable.
You mentioned the intervention times and the reteaching, retesting, and accelerated teaching and what have you. Was that to suggest additional, pulling from current resources as far as staff, or additional?
Built into the school day with the current staff.
Well, built in, as far as scheduling, but as far as, are you suggesting hiring more teachers to do that?
No.
Good question.
It would be that some of that reteaching and retesting would be occurring in the school day with the current staff, and noticing the children on their teams maybe that were struggling. It would be part of our RTI process, and some of our schools are already doing that, just, working it into our school day, but it would be more across the board.
But also the accelerated teaching as well. It wouldn't just be focused on.
in addition to.
And your team worked within the parameters of having the same amount of minutes in the school day?
Right. Dr. Hargadine was a member of our team, so we looked at making sure that we met the state guidelines for all the minutes for the various subjects.
Was it hard to stay away from thinking about adding minutes to the day?
We did add minutes to the day at first, and we decided that probably wouldn't work.
I heard, I know I brought this up to Dr. Canos several times before, but tonight I only heard some kind of scheduling interaction between the high schools and middle schools. Was there any consideration? I know there's a couple elementary schools that start at that 8:30 mark. Did you guys did you consider at all moving those down to 9 with some of the other elementaries?
That's really separate from the scope of their work because they're mostly middle and high school. We have to factor that into
The bus.
how that
Yeah.
works with the bus. And unfortunately, just to be candid and honest, I mean, there's flexibility in the elementaries because there's so many of them.
Yeah.
You know, so it's hard to split 6 middle schools and say, let's make the tier work by moving these 2 middle schools over here, where when you have 19 elementary schools, it's a little easier to adjust that to make the tiers balance out. So that's really going to be a byproduct of how that structure looks and may depend on where we put middle school and where we put high school if we in fact go forward with that model. So it's kind of yet to be really analyzed on the elementary end.
Any comments?
Just make sure you work really hard in that social emotional part. That part just pulls at my heart every time. At-risk kids, those numbers, I wrote it down. At-risk numbers are increasing. If I could spend every bit of our money on taking care of every kid every day, I would love to be able to do that.
I applaud you for saying that, Laura Lee, and I agree that that's important, and I agree with supporting our efforts there. One little bit of a positive there is that I think we do a lot better of a job identifying the social emotional needs of kids because we're paying attention to that. And so not to suggest that the numbers aren't increasing, and absolutely to agree with you wholeheartedly that we need to throw every resource we can at our efforts. But the good side of that is that I think our safety net has broadened significantly. So that allows us to, to better address the social emotional needs of more kids, and we need to keep doing more of it. But I think there is, hidden in there, there's good news in that,
Are you communicating follow up on that? I'm sure you are, but communicating with the high schools as far as incoming ninth graders, as far as being ready for ninth grade and more secure in their social emotional learning? You have something
Yeah, we have
established?
transition plans in place for students as they transition from both ways, from elementary to middle and middle to high. So, and we actually have, and Glenn Hancock's here, I should have called him out. There's our illustrious data guru, Glenn Hancock. So at many of our schools, I don't know all, but many have in our Infinite Campus, we have an RTI tab where that information can follow kids. I don't mean that to sound negative, but it's a way for us to pool our resources. And so when a student transitions from level to level, those interventions that have been utilized and supports that we've put in place for that student, then the next level of staff can see that. But we also have those face-to-face meetings as well. Our counselors facilitate those transition meetings so that we're sharing information.
So what I was thinking about was, after putting in more resources in the area of social emotional learning, are the students going to high school better prepared more? Are they having less issues at the high school because of the extra work that's happening at the middle school? It would be interesting to see those results. It's probably way too early.
Right, and we definitely are interested in that. Again, Glenn has spent a lot of time and research on how can we start measuring that, because we absolutely want to test our effectiveness, that what are the strategies that are really yielding results, and where are we still maybe missing some pieces that we can tweak or
And
add.
what are the measures?
Exactly.
They're hard.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'd be remiss not to mention this. There's no secret about the fact that that's a lot that's behind our efforts with more innovative learning too, because we know more kids connect, we know more kids engage, and that works so well. It's so much in harmony with the focus on social emotional learning, and that's what gets me extremely excited to think about just the future that we continue to march toward with, again, that safety net that's bigger and more opportunities for kids to connect with more innovative styles of teaching. That recipe is definitely one for success that's better than any recipe we've seen in education in a long, long time.
When I have been in the elementary classrooms, I'm amazed at the classroom management, the innovation, the classroom management that's going on to allow kids to all be working at different levels, doing different groupings, and yet the students are so engaged. And I don't see any behavior concerns. I mean, I see well-regulated kids that are engaged in the learning process, and that's really a tribute to the teachers who have put that in place and the people who have provided the skill work with the teachers.
Yeah, I agree. One thing, when you're implementing this program and, this system in place, social emotional learning, this is a word that's being thrown around, but I know it wasn't used when I was growing up. And so have you guys thought of how you're going to educate the parents and in that inclusion with the families so that they're learning the same thing?
Great point, great question. And we're already starting to do that. We've already, I know at the school levels, again, and that's early childhood through 12th grade, we're already starting, obviously we have parent series at all of our schools in various capacities, but even just ongoing communications about what is social emotional learning and just sharing that information with parents. And so it probably looks a little different in different schools, but we know from this perspective, from the middle school perspective, as it becomes a more focused approach in our middle schools, that absolutely, that parent communication piece will be very important, parent education and things parents can do to support the efforts we're doing at school. And so yeah, there will be a very committed effort to that we're intentionally bringing our parents along with us so that they are fully engaged in that process as well. And our survey information shared some of that there were just a lot of questions that I think I'm in support, but maybe don't know a lot about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That will be one of the key pieces of the work of that advisory team, is what is the professional learning for our teachers and staff, what is the learning for parents, how do we create that in a structure that is welcoming and inviting and where parents feel safe to come and participate in those conversations together. So that will be the work of that advisory team.
That's a very good point. Thanks, Karen.
Any other comments?
Last thing, and you pointed out, Glenn, but man, your surveys throughout this whole thing, and Kathy, the work that you guys did and the data that came in, I mean, I got to see it on from a couple different perspectives, both doing the surveys and then looking at your results that night, and then what was communicated out is just top notch. It was really, really well done. Yeah.
Glenn and Kathy and a lot of people that hear
Yeah. Yep.
hear that.
Yep.
All right, the motion on the floor then is to approve the recommendations and direct you to begin the implementation phase. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. That passes. Thank you. Look forward to hearing your recommendations.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. The next, we got a couple of items. I think Chris Friend's going to join us. Motion to approve the bond issue purchases and related contracts, $7,500 to $150,000 as submitted. We have a motion? We have a second? Second, there we go. Welcome.
Good evening. We have several items on the agenda for approval tonight. It is that time of year where we're getting cranked up for the summer's work, so you'll have multiple items to consider tonight. The first item under $150,000 is Butler Supply Company. This is for the replacement of the generator at Selvage Middle School. It was part of the original construction of that building, and it's outlived its life cycle.
Good job.
Come on, Dad. It's hot up here. The second item is Corporate Flooring Group. This is for the replacement of the walk-off carpet at the main entrance of Marquette High School and the entrance into the theater area. Third item under $150,000 is actually an item that just recently popped up. At Kerrs Mill, it is on a 4-pipe boiler system. The boiler is actually located behind the building across the service drive. We've had multiple leaks pop up on that service loop the last couple weeks. We are actually scheduled, upon approval, to have that work completed over spring break. That is the heating loop for the 4-pipe system at Kerrs Mill.
Those are the three items?
Those are the three under 150.
Any questions about any of those items? All right, the motion is to approve those items for purchase under the bond issue. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. That passes. The next one is, we have 4 separate ones. We'll take them one at a time, just for everybody here, not arbitrarily, but we divide items being purchased under the bond issue, those lower than $150,000 and those above $150,000. Those above $150,000, we take one at a time to make sure we examine them. Those below, we kind of lump together. So we'll take these 4 items one at a time. First is a motion to approve the bond issue purchase and related contract over $150,000 from Ford Hotel Supply Incorporated for district-wide kitchen equipment replacement. We have a motion
Second.
and a second.
Yes, this is a kitchen equipment replacement at 2 locations. Eureka High School, that's the replacement of the existing walk-in freezer and walk-in cooler. And at Rockwood South Middle School, it's the replacement of the serving line. The majority of this project, the kitchen equipment replacement, is being funded by Child Nutrition and Carmen Fisher. And then there's a small portion of flooring that is being funded out of the bond issue cycle money, which is why you see it in front of you tonight. We'll be replacing the tile floor underneath the serving line at Rockwood South while it's being replaced.
All right, any questions about this item? The motion is to approve this item. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, say no. That carries. The next one, need a motion to approve the bond issue purchases and related contracts over $150,000 from James G. Stott Tuck Pointing Incorporated for Wildwood Middle School tuck pointing.
Yes, this is the second phase of a project.
Need a motion?
Sorry.
So moved.
We have a motion?
It's hot.
Second.
And second, there we go.
All right, this is the second phase of a project we started last year to address some air transfer issues and tuck pointing issues on the perimeter of Wildwood Middle School.
How often do you have to do tuck pointing?
Typically, I mean, it will tell you when you need to do it. You'll see mortar joints and stuff starting to fail. You'll have some shifting with foundations that'll call for tuck pointing. But typically, the building will tell you when it's ready.
That didn't help me, though. 10,
Sorry.
15?
Typically 10, 15, 20
Okay.
years, you'll see it.
10, 15, 20, okay.
Any other questions about this item? The motion is to approve this item. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. That carries. The next one is a motion to approve the bond issue purchases and related contracts over $150,000 from Watkins Roofing Incorporated for district-wide roof improvements, and this is the first package of that. There's a second one coming up. Is that that motion?
So moved. Second.
Or a motion and a second. Thank you.
It's hot up here.
It is, it's hot.
I'm cold, actually.
All right, this is the first package, as Matt mentioned, that we have 2 roofing packages for this summer that are going out. This one is for Blevins Elementary and Rockwood Summit High School. The majority of this package is at Blevins Elementary. There's a small portion at Rockwood Summit that we're going back to pick up above the library area, but this is a full roof replacement at Blevins Elementary.
Blevins is about 22 years old?
That's correct.
Okay, so that'd be about right. Any questions on this item?
How'd you know that?
We helped build it. Any other questions on this item? This motion is to approve this first roofing package. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. That carries. And the last one, a motion to approve the bond issue purchases and related contracts over $150,000, again from Watkins Roofing for district-wide roof improvements, package number 2.
So moved. Second.
This is the second roofing package, and it includes the roof replacement at Wild Horse Elementary.
Same thing, different schools.
Yes,
Any
identical building.
comments, questions on this one? The motion is to approve this bond purchase. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. That carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Next item is the COPE Committee, Communications Outreach and Public Engagement, and I think it's just informational, so who's going to take that?
Well, Dr. Kinder was supposed to, and he decided not to be here, so Mrs. Bays is.
So we got together Monday this week, last week? Last week.
Last week.
And we just talked about a few things. We talked about Prop T and the communication that's going on right now in the district, which has been really well done. The videos that are out have been really well received, and so there is more information on the website that you can look at there. We also talked about board involvement. We talk about this periodically, just to keep it fresh and on the table, so that we're all on the same page when it comes to being invited to events and attending events and things like that. With this many schools and 6 of us right now, we just want to make sure that when there's awesome things happening that we're there, and we're always happy to come in as our schedules allow and things like that. So we just talked about how that looks and getting regular updates, and wouldn't you know, sitting on our table tonight is a list of the last few months, I guess, of the school year. So there we go. And then we talked about this room and the change in location from Crestview to here, and how wonderful this room is for these meetings. We all just felt that way. During our meeting, Kathy and her team did a great job setting this room up. It's very warm, I find, and welcoming for people to come in and sit in here, and I think it's been a good switch. So we just kind of wrapped up some of those topics, and that was about it. Anything else?
I think you're right about the schools, to try to attend as many events as we possibly can. It's helpful, though, not to just show up at a school. And I think everybody knows that you don't try not to be disruptive, but you get a lot of invitations, and it's always a happy thing to get. So. Any other discussion on the COPE Committee? All right, the next item is the agenda for the next board meeting, which is March 23rd. And there's the planning agenda right now. Robotics. Looking forward to that. That'd be fun. And we've got some other items on it, so it doesn't look real, like a real heavy agenda at this point anyway.
Karen, we talked about the robotics kids, and we were kind of debating. Last time they came out, you may recall, they set up, they're really excited about what they do, and it's really a cool component to what's in our schools, and we want to keep supporting and keep building and keep getting more and more kids and more age levels involved. So they come out, but we felt kind of bad last time because it's not really conducive to the fact, I mean, we have closed session, you come out of closed session, and then we have to start, but we don't want to discourage them not to come. So we were just talking about this the other day, that we really want to allow them to be there kind of for demonstrations even before they do a presentation. So maybe just be cognizant of that. We're gonna tell them to just remind them that, hey, there may not be a lot of involvement. And when it was at Crestview, you had the potential to have some walk-in because Crestview's an active place. You're probably not going to have that here. It's not a evening event building. So just if that means on that night you could show up a little before closed session, maybe really appreciated by the kids.
Okay. The last item is kind of crosses what we said on COPE, the future agenda items and presentations. We do have a schedule there for, believe it or not, the last couple months of the school year. So doing a pretty good job. Any other items people want to point out? Or?
So I just asked Janet, so Herman and I were the ones that always said we love these. If somebody, I mean, do you guys read these? If we don't think we need them anymore.
Very often.
Over a number
Well, the
of years.
bird's about to turn over, so they're probably good to keep.
I like them.
I'm not going to be, but I know when I first, got on the board, it was something that was good to read and to have, and
All right, let's,
just my suggestion.
Yeah, over a number of years, they start to repeat themselves a little bit, but
Yeah.
they're good. They're well written.
keep them.
All right, is there any other items tonight from anyone? We will adjourn. Thank you for coming.